Previewing the NFC Championship game, this is part 3 between the Commanders and Eagles, two big-time NFC East rivals, and they date back all the way to the 1930s. But for this particular matchup, a trip to New Orleans and the Super Bowl is on the line. The Commanders started off hot early. They had a brilliant start to the season behind star sensational rookie Jayden Daniels as he bursted onto the scene, catching NFL media hearts by storm. The Commanders reached a 7-2 record heading into their first matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles, who got off to a little bit of a slow start, 2-2, but figured out things as they returned from the bye week. And in that matchup, the Eagles prevailed at home 26-18. And while the final score was one possession, the Eagles just had another gear in that matchup. While trailing 10-3, heading into the back part of the third quarter, the Eagles offense finally woke up. Saquon burned the Commanders defense for 2 long touchdown runs, and the Eagles defense forced a stop on Jayden Daniels on 4th down and intercepted him to essentially seal the game. The second game has a little bit of an asterisk next to it because Jalen Hurts only played 2 drives in this game. And while he was there, the Eagles were dominating. They were up 14-0. They were up 21-7 at one point. And in the second half, with Kenny Pickett at the helm, their offense stagnated and they were restricted to field goals. And while the defense did force 5 turnovers, including 2 Jayden Daniels interceptions, they did collapse in the fourth quarter, giving up 3 touchdown passes to Jayden Daniels as he rallied the Commanders to a 36-33 victory. Now, many people forget that in that second matchup that the Commanders did benefit from a key Eagles defender being ejected from the game, and that's C.J. Gardner-Johnson, their starting safety. He's the leading defensive back of their secondary, with leading the team in interceptions. And when C.J. Gardner-Johnson was ejected from the game after getting into a scuffle with Commanders offensive players, the whole game flipped. The Eagles were in command of that game. They were up by 13 points with possession of the ball. And unfortunately after that, like I said, their defense collapsed. And Jayden Daniels got hot. He had 3 touchdown passes, leading them to a comeback victory. Now, in both matchups, Saquon Barkley ran for over 145 yards and had 2 touchdowns in each game. And yet again, he's going to be key in their success to advancing to the Super Bowl this year. Saquon Barkley has been amazing this year, but this is the biggest game of his career, and expecting that Jalen Hurts is going to be a little bit hobbled after sustaining a knee injury in the divisional round matchup against the LA Rams, well, they're going to need Saquon Barkley to lead the way. He's been their superstar all season, and he's going to need to hit a couple of home runs for them to advance. I do think that their offensive line has a distinct advantage against the middle-of-the-pack Commanders' run defense, and I think they've done better in recent weeks, but the Commanders still gave up a ton of yards per rush against even Jahmyr Gibbs in the divisional round. And it was really just because Jared Goff turned the ball over so often that they had to abandon the run and go pass. I'll give some credit to their defensive backs. Marshawn Lattimore and Sanistril have been great, especially in the recent weeks during the playoffs. But facing A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith is going to be a big test. And I forgot to mention in the second matchup, the bailout in that game was also a Devontae Smith drop. Well, since that game, Jalen Hurts has been missing time at the end of the regular season, but in the postseason, the passing game has been a little bit quiet. And many people are concerned about Jalen's ability to lead an offense, and is this offense a Super Bowl winning offense? Well, the thing is, that's not their formula for winning games. Actually, in games that Jalen throws for even more than 150 yards, they lose. And that's really the key in this game. I think that they have to find a way to keep the balance, stick to what they need to do, not be like the Ravens who overcompensate and try to showcase, well, Jalen can pass the ball all over the yard. Well, passing conditions will be better, and the question is, will he have some escapability because he's banged up with his knee? Some injuries to watch, especially for the Eagles, is that starting center Cam Jurgens and starting tight end Dallas Goedert have been missing practice so far this week. And at the time of this recording, they are probably going to be questionable heading into the matchup. Now, whether or not they suit up will be a big difference because that affects the line and also just another pass catcher that Jalen can pass to when the Eagles are on offense. Dallas Goedert is super key because he has been the consistent receiver in this playoff run, and if he is absent, that is a major blow to the Eagles. Cam Jurgens has been a Pro Bowl center, and I expect him to be there eventually, but let's hope that he does find a way to get onto the field for the championship game. Jaden Daniels has a difficult test because in 2 games against this Vic Fangio defense, he's had 3 turnovers. It was only one of 2 matchups in the regular season that he had multiple interceptions in a single game. I understand 5 touchdown passes is great, that is a phenomenal game, but yet again, this Eagles defense is fairly healthy. I think with the exception of the injury to Nakobe Dean for this championship game, the secondary is intact. The Eagles are going to have Quinny and Mitchell back in the lineup, Darius Slay, Reed Blankenship, Cooper DeJean in the slot, and it should be a pretty good defense, especially with CJ Gardner-Johnson, who I don't expect to be ejected in another game. The big test is also going to be getting pressure and containing Jaden Daniels, because pressure up the middle, especially with the Commanders losing their starting guard in the divisional round, is key, because that's another blocker that maybe can try to stop Milton Williams, Moro Ojomo, but especially Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter took over the game against the Rams, and I expect him to do that against the Commanders. He's had good success in recent games in the NFL playoffs, and Nolan Smith has been phenomenal. He's been great coming off the edge. He has 3 sacks in the postseason. Jalen has 2. As the Georgia Bulldogs defensive front have combined for 5 sacks in 2 playoff games. And with Zach Bond as the linebacker, that's going to be key, especially in coverage, because I think Zach Ertz, the former Eagle tight end, is going to be key, especially when it comes to the red zone. If they can find ways to force the Commanders to be one-dimensional, bottle up the run, keep Jaden Daniels contained in the pocket, and eliminate the edge runs, I think the Eagles have a really good shot to win this game. And it comes down to the trenches. I think that's really the Eagles' strongest point, especially it hinges on the health of Cam Jurgens, at least on the offensive side. But with Vic Fangio, he's been just so good in game planning for this type of game. And I think in the second matchup, when they gave up that many points, they took offense to that, because since then they've really clamped down. They haven't given up a ton of points or a ton of yardage, and I expect them to have an improved performance and get in the face of Jaden Daniels early and often. This is going to be physical. These are 2 divisional rivals, and like I said, this is a trip to the Super Bowl on the line. I'm predicting that the Eagles win this matchup, and it comes down to the star power led by Saquon Barkley, the receivers, and just their defense. Their defense is really the strongest unit in the entire NFL. It's the #1 ranked defense. And if they're all healthy and humming at the same time behind the raucous crowd at Lincoln Financial Field, I expect the Eagles to advance to Super Bowl 59